what is Security Market Watch? I don't want to say too much here because there's not a whole lot to say. Security Market Watch essentially is a bunch of professionals in the security industry. So we are sales professionals, we are engineers, we're CEOs, we're CISOs. And, this is sort of security industry or security after dark. It's a bunch of professionals after the day job talking about the day job. And so I hope you guys get a lot of valuable insight into all things security industry out of this episode. So Tim, the floor is yours.
All right, Josh and Maggie, thank you very much for having me. And it's number one. So I feel honored about that. And I'm excited to see where this podcast goes. So a little bit about me. I started my early career in the Air Force, and you can see the plaques behind me there. There's Alaska, and then on the other side is Hawaii. So that's a little bit of what I picked up along the way. In fact, I joined about a week before 9/11, and I remember waking up that morning and realizing the Air Force that I joined was not the Air Force that I thought I was going to join. So that was quite a shock.
Why is that?
Well, obviously 9/11 changed some things with our U.S. military. And so, and all in all, I was very blessed. I was a weather forecaster. I had great assignments. Hawaii and Alaska are two of them, and learned a lot as a weather forecaster. And just again, very lucky, in fact. So 13 years in the Air Force, wouldn't trade it for anything.
Awesome. And your slice or your section of the security industry is all about attack surface management. And right. So could you describe a little bit of what your day job looks like and what you do and what are some of the problems that that you purport to solve?
Sure. So I'm a director of accounts for a firm called Halo Security. We go back about 20 years with McAfee. We're a spinoff of McAfee, so we've been doing this a long time. Been with them for about 4.5 years now, and we really specialize in the external attack surface management space. It's become quite competitive recently over the last 2 years. It's becoming quite popular as security teams are looking to get a handle on everything that is internet facing, including third party and supply chain. So when we talk about attack surface, really what we're talking about is everything with a host name or an IP address. It's everything facing out, everything that the attacker can see when they're doing their reconnaissance and they're combing the internet for gaps and weaknesses within organizations. That's really what we specialize in.
All right, great. Thanks for giving us a little bit of a background. And let's turn to Maggie. And I could see her over there taking notes.
Forgive me.
Furiously.
I'm so old school. I write everything down by hand still. I have a curious question. So I kind of grew up in the ranks of DoD recruiting, specifically with Lockheed Martin. In your opinion, now more than ever, and I didn't realize you had gotten in with the Air Force right before 9/11, but thank you for your service. How do cybersecurity, business security as a whole really tie in with the military and the cyber warfare that's going on, in your opinion? Now, obviously, I'm not looking for statistics here, but especially as a veteran, how would you kind of relate the two and the importance right now with what's going on in the world today?
Well, today and when I was in the Air Force are different worlds, right? So when I was in the Air Force, the internet was, you could say, primitive. It's nothing like it is today for organizations where they're connected to various third parties, meaning subsidiaries, vendors, technology integration. So the internet of today is very complex. And so the organizations that I deal with every day are dealing with a low visibility, high complexity, changing environments, and then often resource constraints. So the Air Force also, even then, was very keen on the users of their network to be aware of cyber threats and just, common sense principles on how to protect your credentials and your personal data. But again, it's just a totally different world. So today it's kind of fun to see where the military is going with cyber warfare and what that really means and what that entails. It's exciting.
Definitely.
It really is a fight. It is a mission, and that's probably why I gravitated to cybersecurity, because I'm up for the fight.
Yeah, we're glad you're with us. Thank you. It was intense when I was there. It was the peak of the backlog for the VA. We were working all different types of governmental contracts, and like you said, it's empowering to see how far we've come. I'm excited about where we're headed. So
Yeah, changing every day. It's a very fascinating industry to be a part of. That's for sure.
absolutely.
How's the recruiting, or not the recruiting, but from a personnel perspective, Maggie, have you still kind of kept tabs on who the military is hiring, or who Lockheed Martin and those kinds of companies are hiring, what kind of talent they're looking for? Has there been a shift that you've seen over like the last 10 years or so?
There has been. I feel that there is so much more as far as resources go that we could tap into. I don't feel that veterans are being used to the capacity, especially from a security standpoint with regard to business operations. I would love to see more programs created where we could take civilians and pair them together, because it's very difficult for veterans to get back into the private sector. In particular, I've experienced it firsthand with clients of mine or candidates that were fresh out of the military and they're trying to get in with a larger firm or something like that, but the only experience they have is military, and it's very different lingo, very different experience, but the same core values. So it has gotten better over the years. I know that the DoD is trying to really actively work with that, but it's difficult. And so I think one of the biggest things we can say is for any recruiting firms out there to develop programs specifically for veterans and even build out a division for that. And then go to your local recruiting offices and pair with them. Those people are extremely connected and they're underutilized. I think they're so busy trying to get recruits for the military. Well, why don't we flip it and say, okay, well, who do you know that's getting out, and how can we be better to service that? And then also go to any large organizations, enterprise-wise, or even the small business startup companies. There's a lot of veteran-owned small businesses that could utilize extra help with regards to business security.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that we don't employ or at least utilize a lot of that talent from veterans, because it's sort of commonplace now to hire from the military, which case in point, Tim came over from the military. But hey, Tim, are you seeing a lot of do you see a lot of hiring in the sales space, or do you hire ever from the military? I know that a lot of people like to hire from a lot of CISOs and security leaders love to hire from the military because of the expertise that comes in, specifically the technical expertise. But from a sales perspective, would you still prefer to hire from the military, or would you prefer to hire someone with more of a business background?
Well, in sales, I mean, sales isn't for everybody, right? So I would be happy to hire from the military for a sales professional if it really is what they're up to doing. So I was fortunate in that my career field was very much about developing a product with teams internationally and then presenting that product in like a sales professional would do in front of mission planners and commanders to make go, no go decisions. So it's weather forecasting. So I was developing products for them to make decisions on in front of rooms or over the phone or over the radio, whatever medium we needed at the time. And they were making decisions on that product. And so obviously that's fairly unique even in the military, right? Military is the lion's share of talent in the military. They're technical people. They're rugged. They're resilient. but not necessarily those that want to stand up and persuade others or pitch a product.
How did you go from the military into sales? Yeah, that's to me, that's like, you're right. You know, like when you think of military people, I mean, a lot of people don't know this, but sales is a very disciplined uh, profession. The salespeople who do well are the ones who are professional, the ones who are very disciplined. So I could see that, but it is kind of spooky going from like the military, which is very technical, very very disciplined, into
Mhm.
a sales profession in attack surface management. So how did you make that transition?
I think I just always wanted to be successful in business. Even in the military, I put myself through an undergrad and an MBA education while serving. And weather does not always hit the fan, so there was lots of dead time there for me to be productive, whether it's studying the weather or working on my homework. And so I was always forward thinking, what's next? The Air Force was definitely a stepping stone for me to excel and make progress on a career.
Well, that just asks, I just have more questions because now, now I'm thinking, okay, how does somebody who loves business get into the military? So like very, but actually, a lot of I could maybe see a connection there because some of the people that I work with in sales, they're very pro military. They're, to your point, Maggie, they're very pro veteran, and they would love to see a lot more investment into our veterans. So maybe that's that's something that I'm probably going to be thinking about over the next couple of days or so, is how do these three very different worlds. Oh, you know what? The business side and the military side does coexist. It's called the military industrial complex.
That's true, man.
And yeah, so yeah, maybe I'm over here thinking that it's weird when actually it's a match made in heaven.
The Air Force in particular is very much run like a business.
Cool.
I was going to say one last comment. I had the privilege of working with a Marine that had just retired after 20 years of service, came out just so much fire and passion, and wanted to do executive headhunting in finance. And I had so much fun working with him. And if he's watching, he already knows who he is. But he had a really difficult time transitioning because we were not only in finance, but we were surrounded by CPAs, and especially Marines, it was very rough around the edges transition wise. And I know he got frustrated, and I just kept saying, stay focused, be yourself. It's not so much about fake it before you make it. Just people will naturally gravitate towards that. And not everybody has to like you in sales. And I meet so many people right out the gate, like, oh man, I hate sales, I would never want to do this. When I'm thinking, if you were just yourself, I think you could have a lot of fun with it. So I just wanted to comment that real quick.
Agreed. Yeah. And I've always been about communication. And in the military, that was my job, was to communicate, was to be clear and to the point, and build confidence in my audience to make a very important decision day after day.
So you'd probably say that your military experience is an asset.
Absolutely.
Sales.
Yeah, very much.
Interesting. Well, you probably would have made a really good general if you wanted to stick with that, because I always think of generals as like the chief executives. They're like or VPs of the military, all business. And they probably have never fired a weapon or seen battle, or they fired a weapon, I'm pretty sure, but they're probably never, they're not on the front lines. All right, I'm going to stop talking about the military because I know nothing about the military, and I will embarrass myself. Okay, Tim, you have, I don't know if you've crafted this or it's the first time I've heard it, and I heard it out of your mouth first, which is a term called pleasant persistence. So what is pleasant persistence?
It really is about finding the right amount of assertiveness. So obviously sales requires a lot of outbound. Either you're in customer sales where you're trying to generate that meeting to make progress on their security objectives, or it's going for new logos and they don't know who you are and you want to get in front of them and have them pay attention. So pleasant persistence was something my CEO coined years ago, referring to my ability to just be disciplined and be consistent in my outbound, in my outreach, to make meetings happen. And it became naturally to reach out to, and for example, with customer sales, one of the things that has really helped me is to take really good notes. So I've had the privilege of being able to work with hundreds of customers over thousands of hours, being in front of the customer with my security engineers, the experts on the technical side of our program, and to take good notes on what are their challenges, what are their objectives, what progress are we making today, what's next. And then so as I would go outbound to try to generate that next meeting or go after other customers, I knew what my customers were facing. And so I could be persistent with that, and I could be pleasant about it because it was always all about them. And I think the more that you can make it about them, the more successful you're going to be in garnering their respect and trust, and to get their attention to make progress on what there is to do.
I've been reading up and doing some research on Loom outreach. So basically creating a little video, putting it, and that's everything you're saying reminds me of that, is make yourself personal. Instead of blasting out like all these automatic, the automatic blast outreach has its place. I think it's really good marketing, a very good marketing tool, but it sounds like pleasant persistence has a little bit more of a human touch to it. And
absolutely,
it's like what you call in the old country. I don't know. I don't know what old country I'm talking about, but a little bit of charisma, something not smooth and sleazy, like the way that like a used car salesman's perceived. Shout out to all my used car salesmen, salesmen. No, not knocking it, but I'm just saying, like, the perception is that salespeople are very like pushy but for you, it seems like pleasant persistence is really about understanding your customer, probably about understanding your product as well. So let's tie that into attack surface management, and that's a slice of the market that's really interesting and is ramping up, because the problem is very simple. You can't secure what you don't know you have, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what is the value prop that you are uniquely pursuing these days?
Well, first off, it's a very proactive approach. Okay. So not everybody's up for it. In fact, if you were to ask me who my challenges are in terms of my target market, it would be small business. Often small businesses, security teams will believe and say things like they're not a target because they're too small. And the three of us here know that that's just not the case. In fact, attackers will look for small businesses because they know that small businesses think that way. And there's often gaps and weaknesses that they can exploit. So it's proactive. They need to be up for it, meaning we're really addressing cyber hygiene from a perimeter-wide approach. So again, everything with a host name and an IP address. We're helping them get a handle on those elements that attackers are looking for when they're doing their reconnaissance. Things like weak ciphers and outdated certificates and JavaScript source code and form security and DNS configuration and subdomains with CNAMEs that aren't pointing to any resources that they thought they were. And really, what you don't know that you don't know. There's probably legacy projects out there on most organizations that were built and launched and are still out there and not supposed to be. There's probably open ports out there with products and services that aren't being used anymore, or there's open ports with no products and services on them, in which case we always recommend just to turn those off. So it's about reducing exposure, right? It's about reducing that footprint. Don't be attractive to an attacker. And that can be a heavy lift, particularly for the mid-market to enterprise level organizations where there's just so much out there. The internet of today is just so different than it was. And now you have regulatory compliance requirements, cyber insurance requirements that are mandating now that organizations get a handle on third-party and supply chain risk. And so that's fairly new, but again, it is becoming popular because it's becoming mandatory.
I think that I've been most recently getting approached by regulatory compliance firms asking for assistance. The questions that they're asking, some I don't even know how to approach because it's changing so rapidly. So you really hit a point there with that one. I also think that as we build things out, you had mentioned, that pleasant persistence. I had always been taught to do professional persistence, but even that term's changed a lot. And I think there's a lot of sales executives, they go one of two ways. They either are too nice and then they get shut down and they don't have any type of rebuttal. Usually that's more of the newcomers, or they have rebuttals and they can be so aggressive with them. And especially when you're talking to a regulatory compliance firm versus a small business, you have to talk very different lingos. There's so many different types of sales approaches. And I think the mastery of that has to be, you have to be open to consistently changing your approaches, writing out templates, seeing what works best for you, what doesn't. I've been a part of a sales team that all they did was pump out constant emails all the time, and it was like the same thing over and over again, and it just didn't get the job done on the scale that we were hoping to do. So I appreciate everything you're saying. I'm in agreement with you for sure.
Cool. And Josh, I hope that answered your question. So the bottom line is there is a lot of work for these teams to do, and it's critical that they get it done. And so the more that I can be assertive with the right amount of assertiveness and push them in a way that they find pleasant.
Yeah.
To make progress. It's like what the alternative is, your dirty laundry's out there for exploitation, right? And there's a lot there. So
yeah. I mean, terms like shadow IT come to mind.
Right.
But we know in the security industry, selling security is difficult because let's say I am a CEO of a small business, small, medium business. I don't have a fully built out security system or a built out system.
Yep.
I'm profitable. Life is good. Nobody that I know has been breached, right? Actually, I'll use a really good example. I live in a pretty, I don't want to say common, but like it's a well-known apartment management company in Minneapolis, right? And I was talking to my landlord about security, and I said, you guys have a lot of my data. You have a lot of everybody else's data. You have social security numbers. You have tax information. You have income information that attackers will use. They would use that information to basically, like, let's say even your address history, right? So they can use that. And, famously, you forget your password. They ask, where are these places that you've lived before? They have that information now. He said to me, and for the love of God, please don't use this information for evil. We will find you. So his thing was, we don't have any of that secure, and we have computers, we have databases, a lot of the records are kept in paper files, right? So the physical security, apartment buildings are really good at physical security. They have locks, they have the beep in things. Just go on TikTok, look at the Karens telling you that you can't come in and follow her behind, when there's no tailgating, because we have cameras, locks, and Karens. Physical security is good. But the digital stuff, they're moving away from the paper trail to keeping things on, I mean, very small hard drives, but they're hard drives nonetheless, and they can be breached. He said that the reason that they won't do anything for security, he said, as an industry, not as a one company, but a group of companies, each of these companies might be responsible for like 5,000 doors, right? And or 5,000 apartments. And their reasoning is there's just never been a breach that they know of. I told him, I said, look, there's been a breach. I'm 100% sure. Like, you guys aren't, it's not rocket science to break into this stuff. Again, please, that was not Josh. Don't say Josh said, okay? So how do you convince an entire industry? Because it's not like you are going to each player and saying, this is why you need, I think that your argument for attack surface management tools is very compelling. And from a security perspective, you're preaching to the choir. I believe you. Maggie believes you, right? But when you're trying to convince these individuals who are basically looking to other individuals, they're like, if one person gets breached, then they all get breached. But if they're profitable, they're conservative, they do not like to spend on anything, how do you approach companies like that? I mean, short of like, actually, I'm not even going to say that. There's certain things we have too much knowledge. I'm starting to think, when you've dabbled in, let's not go there. we're security professionals. Let's leave it there, right? And I don't want to encourage anybody to do anything, but short of like knowledge of there being a breach, how do you approach these people and these leaders who are quite sensible? They're not. They're not crazy. They're not, security people try to paint them as like irresponsible and all that stuff, but they're quite responsible, knowledgeable people. How do you convince them that their way is the wrong way?
It's really great when prospects and customers want to work with us, because what we do is in the demos, we can show them everything they're connected to. We can show them those open doors and open windows. It's like a house, right? Do you keep your windows open at night? Do you go away on vacation and keep your garage door open? Right?
Not anymore.
Right. It makes me think of my dad. So, but in the 80s, my dad had a Blazer, and he would just always keep his doors unlocked on his Blazer, because to him, he was just not a target. And then sure enough, one day in his house, his Blazer was wide open and he got ripped off, and there wasn't much there, but still, it took years for that to happen, but it did happen. And so what's the cost of a data breach? We're about preventing that data breach. And attackers, they don't need much to take over an asset and go lateral right into your crown jewels.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a third-party asset, a supply chain asset. It could be a weak technology in your environment. It could be an outdated certificate or a weak cipher. There's so much that they can leverage to then go direct that asset to their resources with a subdomain takeover, or they can weaponize a script and get inside your web application. They can hijack a session, take advantage of weak cookie security. And then before you know it, there's you're pointing to an adult site or a phishing site, or there's malware in your environment. And so it really does not take much to wreak havoc. What's the cost of a business, even a small business, if a DDoS attack takes them out for 24 hours? So, and many of these solutions are not that costly to be able to get a handle on this and prevent these things. I will say that a lot of these solutions out there aren't created equal. And depending on your team and depending on the strategy that the CISO wants to deploy, and oftentimes it's important that organization have a vendor that's going to be their partner, that's going to take a strategic approach to them and is going to be willing to spend time with them to ensure that their team is comfortable and proficient with the solution, and that they're able to make progress efficiently, and that they have an extension of their security team with that vendor.
I want to tap into something you just said there that I think the public really needs to realize. And I know any recruiter will love me for saying what I'm about to say. After I went through a lot of executive headhunting and when I moved over into the IT sector, I am not exaggerating, and I was keeping my own statistics here. Everything from maybe 1 to 2 years of experience all the way up to CIO, when interviewing them comparatively and looking at what the clients are looking for, only 50% were qualified to do the jobs needed. We are already at a 3.5 million deficit on cybersecurity individuals. And when you add that statistic in, the risk alone goes way up.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is something that businesses, board of directors, CEOs, and all of them need to really be aware of who they're trusting with this type of material. Because what was I just posted about this yesterday. It's 4.35 million is the average breach for any company right now. And like you said, it doesn't cost that much just to get that insurance, and that's EN insurance, not IN. And a good comparable of that would be, think about if you were to have no health insurance and you end up in a life-threatening accident, what the financial risks alone would be. That mentality has to be there, and it has to begin with hiring the right professionals, asking very particular questions. And a lot of the people making the hiring decisions, with no disrespect to generational, but these people don't even understand the internet themselves. So they're hiring people who say they know the internet and business security and all of this, when in fact, they're not hiring someone who's capable of keeping their networks and everything else secure. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
That's a really good segue into the question of third-party risk. So what is the cost of not having good security? Yes, getting breached, you can price out that data, you can estimate the cost of your data, and you can run a risk analysis and all that stuff. But we're learning that if you are breached and you lose customers to another company that did not get breached, that's a cost. How do you quantify that cost? And so, Tim, how does attack surface management play into this emerging risk of basically third party negligence in the competitive landscape?
Yeah, that's an easy but important question. I mean, and then in terms of the result, I mean, client acquisition cost, for one, is what goes up if you're breached. I mean, who's going to want to do business with you, right? So attack surface management. So we're looking at gaps and weaknesses throughout the perimeter. And so third party is part of that. So you consider the internet of yesterday, it was primitive, right? You had a server, it could have been in your closet. The web application you probably built, you knew where everything was. You weren't connected to you weren't connected to third parties for the most part. You had WordPress and you had chat and help desk, and you knew all about it. Today, to be competitive, e-commerce businesses need to integrate technologies and solutions to create that visitor experience. You can't get away with building everything and assuming that you're secure. So, and also the cloud, right? We're hosting data in the cloud, AWS. We're connected to Google and different technologies for advertising. We're using blog platforms. We're using technologies for help desk and for chat. We have subsidiaries. We have potential mergers and acquisitions. What is the organization inheriting through an acquisition? What is on the perimeter? And then there's the legacy projects. Those projects that, again, were built in the past and they're still out there and nobody knows about them. So there are third parties within all of that, right? There's developers that are being creative, driving business outcomes as they should. The question becoming more and more, is it being built securely? What third-party tools are they using? Where is the data being hosted? Does the script have the API keys in it? Is it public? Are there session tokens and other secrets that attackers could have, would really enjoy finding within the script source code? So again, third party is part of all of that, and so our position is if your name is on it in any way, if it was taken over, yeah, if it's connected to your network in any fashion, there needs to be visibility and control over that asset, regardless of who built it, regardless of the relationship with the vendor or the technology. You simply need visibility and control over that in real time, continuous monitoring. So, for example, subdomains are often picked up for type of squatting, right, to prevent attackers from taking over the brand name and building something that tarnishes the organization's brand. All of those subdomains are public, and they can even be redirecting to the parent site, which is fine. But those are often the targets of attackers who take those over when nobody's looking and redirect them to their resources, adult sites and phishing sites and what have you. So it doesn't matter what. Again, third party to me means it doesn't matter who is managing it. If your name is on it in any way, you need to have visibility over it all the time.
It's compelling. And even if I think it's also compelling for those who you might be working with other third parties, and you want to know that you want to keep tabs on, not tabs, but you want to kind of keep them, hold them accountable. But also myself as a vendor, I am a third party. I have to think of myself as a third party. A lot of companies, I don't want to say that they're not thinking about it, but I don't hear about it as much. I hear about a lot of people thinking about their third party risk in terms of their supply chain, but also neglecting the fact that they are a part of a supply chain.
They're connected.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all connected.
And so that's often what we'll challenge them to do, right? Is, what would you do? We'll ask the customer, what would you do if you found something that you were uncomfortable with that the third party was exposing you to? And the answer we're looking for is we would call them and get them to clean it up. But you can't do that if you don't know about it, right? So the first thing is visibility.
That's the major selling point for asset attack surface management. There are lots of tools that you sort of have to kind of really have to push a little bit extra to sell, because you're trying to make the case for cybersecurity. But I think attack surface management is one of those things. Like, you're right. It's a very simple calculation. Do you know what you have? No. Well, how do you know that it's secure? Well, I think so, probably even before pen testing, because to pen test, you sort of, pen testers may do both. They might do some attack surface management or discovery on the way to doing their pen test, but it's embarrassing. It's got to be embarrassing to find on your pen test that you've got like 30 servers that you didn't know you had. Like, it's one thing to be like, yeah, like we know that person was a new hire. We have to redo our onboarding processes. We have a bunch of, we don't have the best password policy. We don't have the best access controls. Okay, great. But I've got 30 servers I didn't know. They're connected to an entire domain that I didn't know existed. That's got to be embarrassing. So that's a really easy proposition there. So if we're looking at pleasant persistence again, right? How do we? And pleasant persistence is sort of starting to sound like the alternative to scare tactics, which is I'm one of the few people who thinks a scare tactic. I think it still works. And I think it mostly goes by the moniker of threat hunting. Like, okay, so let's approach risk from a threat perspective. Okay, that's still scare tactics. But pleasant persistence seems to penetrate the market more with common sense. But let's be fair. You're working with a tool and within a slice of the industry that has a very high need, right? So I'm not going to say it's easy to basically talk about the merits of that solution, but it's easy relative to, not easy. I don't want to say easy, but it's simpler relative to some other solutions. But you will find yourself talking to really difficult people who, as pleasant as you are and as persistent as you are, you're just not gonna, they're just difficult. It's really hard. So
True.
Are there particular verticals or particular roles or people that you talk to on a daily basis or a weekly basis or interact with from time to time that pleasant persistence, just like, you just got to be that much more pleasant? Gosh darn it. And you got to be
Overwhelm
that
them with
much more
pleasantness.
persistent. Huh?
Overwhelming pleasantness.
Yes. Yes.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't work for the know-it-alls. It doesn't work.
No.
Yeah, the know-it-alls that come in and they have an answer to everything and they're fine and they have a solution that does what we do and whatever. I mean, they've got it all hot, tight. Yeah.
So what do you do? Do you leave those? Do you just leave them? Do you give up? Is there a time?
I'll typically say, it sounds like you really got it together. Do you want to check? You want to take a look at your perimeter? Because that's available. I mean, we can just turn it on. We can meet. We can walk you through what's there, including third party and supply chain. What are you doing for your JavaScript source code? If there was a change to that code, would you be aware of it? What about all those things? What about all those potentials that aren't authorized? The unintentional things, elements, configurations out there that aren't authorized. Wouldn't you want to know if someone was doing something behind your back within your organization? The shadow IT stuff?
Wow, you're scaring me a little, Tim. I almost went, who's me?
I found like that coming straight on with a scare tactic has the know-it-all really pipe up. And it's like, no, we got it.
Yeah.
We got it.
Yeah,
We
because
got it.
you're challenging them.
Yeah. No, we're good. We've got a good firewall.
I was going to say, I use a little bit different tactic, and it's more of a psychological approach. I know when I reach a certain level, especially as a woman, and I hope other women resonate with this one, it's difficult to penetrate a very male-dominated industry. Having blonde hair doesn't always help me. But I would say whenever I can tell someone thinks they know so much more than me, I'm like, okay, that's completely fine. I want you to remember the words I'm about to say. You're going to remember me telling you, I'll talk to you again sometime. And then I leave it. One of the best mentors I ever had told me it can never mean more to you than it does to the client. And when you flip that on them, it gets them thinking like, well, who does she think she is? And then you just walk. If someone's really going to buy into your product or your service, they have to buy into you first. So sometimes the scare tactics from a product standpoint won't work. A pen test, they'll tell you, oh, well, I've got people doing that for me, this, that, and the other. But I think sometimes just saying, okay, Mr. Narcissist, no problem. Go ahead, have a nice day, and I'll talk to you soon. And I am not exaggerating when I say 75% of people I've had to pull that card out with, I end up getting an email or a phone call from even 2-3 years later on down the road and saying, I should have listened to you. We had a breach and, it cost us about $2 million. Oh, okay. Remember how I was just offering a few hundred for me to maybe make a sale with you? Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say you were right. They never say you're right, but that's the beauty in it. And sometimes I'll use Tim's approach. I think it's just a matter of knowing your worth, knowing your service, and really, especially on the small business side, a lot of them are working with MSPs.
Right.
MSP companies in particular, highly targeted. And I mean, I had several clients of my own, and I had one in particular tell me, I'm not sleeping at night because I know if something were to happen to me, 100 of businesses could literally shut down because they'd have to close their doors. That amount of stress. And I would really encourage anyone to assist MSPs on a very high level with their business security. And I will also say the caveat to that is there's a lot of MSPs who think they know it all. Shocker, right?
Okay,
So,
let me just cut in right there, Maggie. I don't like doing this, but I will cut you off right now. I will cut in, because that is the perfect example, like, to what Tim was talking about. MSPs, they are a third party. Like, I am a third party. If I'm an MSP, I've got a target on my back. Everybody knows I'm the problem. How many companies are breached because of MSPs? And they're the hardest ones to sell to because they know it all. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just had to like cut you off to give you like,
that deserves a round of applause right there. I love it. I love it. And you know what else I'll say? Some of my favorite clients are MSPs. They're real people. It's usually kind of like the mixture of a good old boys club, but like real humans meets like uber geniuses, you know, and a lot of them are very passionate. You get more passion with MSPs because they are quite literally held to the fire 24/7. Whereas, you know, another company that's an enterprise level, they're like, oh, no, we got an MSP looking over us. Well, that's the first mistake. You know, but I'll just, cut me off, please. I'm used to it. But also, I'm saying what everybody's thinking.
It's the second set of eyes.
You definitely are.
Don't you want a second set of eyes on the MSP? Or are you entrusting them fully to keep you secure from a breach?
Do you know how many MSP clients I had that literally I would say, okay, I understand your services. What are you doing from a cybersecurity standpoint? And they wouldn't have an actual plan, let alone a backup plan. And when I would, and I mean, this was years ago, things have changed quite a bit, but even the big ones, they have a hard time really assimilating that on an enterprise level or even a governmental scale. You know, there's governmental contractors getting fired because they are not fulfilling compliance regulations. And so it's something that programs in college or certification programs need to focus on how to keep MSPs secured much better. I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, and then the question I always have to add to that is, what assets are they not looking at? Where are the gaps? Do you have one place that you can go to where you can see everything you're connected to and the risk correlated to those assets?
Absolutely.
I'm not gonna lie, Maggie. If I were single and someone approached me and I was just like, it's a hard no. I was just like, you know, no, sorry, I'm not interested. But they, you know, but if she looked me dead in the eye and said, mark my words,
3 years from now,
you'll
call
be
it
hearing
woman's
from me.
intuition. And this is something I've trained female sales professionals this. It's like dating. We don't know everything. It's a nice ebb and flow, but we'll see how it goes because, you know, there's lots of options. And I just leave it at that. So, and that's
right there is
not being cocky from an ego standpoint. It's just knowing. And I think a lot of men underestimate a woman's intuition. We're gifted with it for a reason, and you really could utilize it a little bit better. And
I see now why there hasn't been a lot of women in sales. It is not because it's because we're terrified. Like, y'all know the tactics, like y'all know how to do, you know how to do the thing, because that is the women's intuition. I think in the boardroom, in a customer call, in an investor's call, like you just have a different perspective and a different way of looking at things, and it works.
I will admit to you, and oh God, I hope this doesn't come down. Don't say Maggie says. I have quite literally walked out of huge meetings with multi-million-dollar investors sitting at a table. The egos are flying, the cuss words are flying. We're talking, it's like a poker game, right? And I just stand up and walk out. And they all look around like, what did we say? And it's like, what are you doing here? Or why am I here? If you don't want my opinion or you don't want to hear what I'm saying from a woman aspect, then why did you even invite me? What, to take notes? I don't think so. Sorry.
I never would have even thought of that.
Yeah.
You know,
it's like a would you sit at a table having dinner with people that, quite frankly, not necessarily offending you, but you're just not connecting? Why would you waste your time? Excuse me, I'm here to make money too. I gotta go. If you're gonna waste my time, I'm gonna go sit with some other people that are actually gonna listen to me and give me the platform to talk. So thanks for having me here, Josh, by the way.
You know, and that's what it's like. Well, that's what it's like in dating too. You know, like you've said 5 things in the last 5 minutes that I just never would have thought about. I just never would have thought that that's the approach. But if a girl liked me and I didn't like her and we were sitting in a coffee shop and I was like talking, ranting, cussing, doing whatever, and she just got up and walked out, I'd be like, what's wrong with me? What, I'd be up at 3 a.m. thinking about, she said she's going to see me again. And I don't think so, but she seemed pretty confident. So 3 years later, we'd be married.
Well, and I think it's a matter of putting egos aside, respecting one another's skill set. Tim and I, we really connected from a sales perspective, and I kind of want to segue a little bit into strategic account management, the different things that come along with that. But pairing skills on different bases. So I'm much more of an eye in the sky, operational oversight type of sales professional. Tim is more on the technical nitty gritty. He's already got me sold within the first minute that he's talking. I'm like, what is that term? I don't even know what that is. Can you speak in layman terms? And I'm not afraid to ask that. But on the flip side of that, sometimes you get someone that's an 80-year-old business owner who doesn't even want to use the internet, literally, especially in Midwest America. Shout out to the heart of America. But and you got to talk layman terms and say, hey, do you want to lose $30,000? No? Yes? Okay. Well, then maybe you might want to take a look at this contract. You got to be able to talk the lingo and sometimes pull out that dating card, so to speak. And I would also say, do it from a very integrity-filled professional aspect. Women.
Yeah, if I try to do it, it would come off creepy. It wouldn't come off
happens, believe me.
Yeah, it wouldn't come off as professional, and I'd probably botch it. But all right, so
the thing I was going to add before we
yes, please
part here is that women can say things that I can't say. They can get away with saying
like
things
what, Tim? Like what? Say
it. You know what I'm saying. Move on.
Yeah, I can't say it either. So what are we talking about? Okay.
Oh, that's a rabbit hole in and of itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I want to kind of touch on what you just said, Tim. So let's talk a little bit about.
Please, Maggie, you say it, because neither Tim or myself can say it.
Oh, I'm going for it. So let's talk a little bit about strategic account management. You had mentioned something, and I loved the term gourmet experience.
Mm-hmm.
In a little bit less classier way, I used to refer to it. Do you want Burger King or fast food, or would you like a filet mignon?
Right. Yep.
They both are going to feed you, but there's just a different level of quality. So what do you mean by that? Tell us a little bit through that and how that would even tie in with being a strategic account manager and their mentality.
Yeah, there really needs to be a fit between the organization, the vendor, and the client to be strategic. And the analogy that I like to share is fast food versus gourmet. So 80%, let's just say, of a business, they're serving fast food, meaning it's transactional. And the customers, that's what they came for. So in a drive-through, they're in line, they want hot, fast food, they want to pay and get out. Mm-hmm. They don't need to talk to you. They don't want to talk to you. They just want your product and they want to move on. 80% of the business could be that. And that is hugely profitable. There's nothing wrong with that model. But there are probably 20% who really want the white glove approach, and they want a gourmet meal. They want the filet mignon. They want to come in, they want to experience the filet mignon, they want to peruse the menu, they want the great service from the wait staff, they want to talk with you, they want to meet the chef. They want that gourmet experience. And that is also an exceptional model for things like retention. We know that strategic accounts that are managed well with a program where we're building an account plan with that customer, we retain them, they expand, we get to enjoy higher gross margin. And leading up to those lagging indicators, you could call profit and more revenue a lagging indicator. Leading up to that, you're building the account plan. You're getting great feedback on your solution. Likely your product team is changing your product based on that feedback, based on that relationship. So it goes from transactional, that's the fast food, to a great relationship. You could call that a preferred supplier. The next level would be a solutions partner, to where you actually have a plan in place around the solution, to where you're making progress on their objectives around that plan. They're giving good feedback on your solution. You're adapting your solution for them. And then there's the pinnacle, which would be like a marriage between the client and the vendor. That's trusted advisor. They're invested in you and you're invested in them. And that's a relationship between a client and a vendor that's built to last, and built in a way to where you're both co-creating value and you're both enjoying that value.
Perfect answer. I love that. I think that one of the hardest things some sales executives have to learn the hard way is retention. And it's hard sometimes from a humanistic standpoint, because we change as people, every other year, every 5 years, and if your client goes, okay, basic example, let's say your client goes through a divorce or loses a parent, and their life has radically changed as far as their family, their friends, whatever. And something like that can truly impact a relationship with their vendors. They might have a different take on the world, how they do business, what their goals are. Another hard thing to overcome is when you have a really good relationship with someone and you call in, and next thing you know, rug gets pulled out. Oh, you know what? They actually left the company a month ago. Well, that right there should tell you, number one, if you really have a relationship with a client, they're going to call you before they leave and say, hey, heads up,
Yeah,
I'm going to be leaving the organization. But that takes a lot of that equal given back and forth with the value added piece too.
yeah, and is the vendor connected to the C-suite?
Correct.
Right? It can't be just one engineer. To be strategic, you really need to get the C-suites involved. And then the vendor organization really needs to have a program around strategic account management for that to work, so that the SAM, the strategic account manager, can effectively go internally and mobilize their resources. There needs to be integration
Absolutely.
throughout the organization for that to really work. But it's proving to be really worth it. And as the landscape becomes more competitive, and as cybersecurity becomes more complex, there really is a lot to be gained by SAM programs, by building those relationships to where it really is built on trust and value, so that they can go the distance with each other.
I agree. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you.
That's a really good way to close out.
Great.
Thank you both. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us on episode number 1. Again, I am your
A lot
host.
of fun.
Yes, thank you so much. How do you end these things? We just
I have one thing for anyone that stayed with us this long. We appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. We hope that you really got some value from what we've discussed here. We're trying to really think outside of the box with our topics, and we appreciate any feedback. And also, our next episode is going to be featuring the CIO for the city of Las Vegas. We're going to be tackling a very brand new industry from from maybe what's talked about as much, I think. And so we're really excited to having him on, and we hope that you join us. So, thanks,
Great.
Tim. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you guys.
Thanks, Maggie. Oh, and Tim, if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way?
Connect on LinkedIn.
All right. And
Tim-Scanlin, Scanlin on LinkedIn.
you can find me on LinkedIn as well, or you can email me at josh@bruning.com. Maggie, do you want to be reached? How can people reach you?
They'll find me on LinkedIn. Same thing. You'll see my name right there. Maggie Dillon. Hi, nice to meet you. Send me a connection invite. I love to make friends. So,
All right, great. Thanks, everybody.
thank
Bye.
you.